have to admit it. I just have this thing about listening to people talk about the planning of a perfect crime. It's so interesting to me. I just sit back and I close my eyes and I just listen to what they have to say and to see in my mind, envisioning it. Would it work? Would it not? You know, it's amazing. It's amazing the things that people who have never committed a crime before in their life, especially a violent one like a quadruple homicide, can lay it all out before you of the perfect planning of a crime. That man or woman planned it with the total intent that they were never going to get caught. Well, at least I would hope so, right? I'm ARHayes. This is Convict Thoughts. And you know what? It actually gets mind-boggling to me. It's frustrating to sit back and continuously watch people discuss the Idaho 4 crime and Bryan Kohberger, the suspect, as if he was attempting to commit this crime and planned it to where he would commit the perfect crime for all to see. And coming from my background, yeah, I lived a life of crime, and it's nothing to be proud of, but I do know something. No matter how much you actually attempt to plan something, you're never truly planning with the intent to commit the perfect crime. That's not something that a criminal does. Not even a first-timer. You plan to commit the crime that you're intending to do, and you hope that you're capable of getting away with it. There's no planning perfection. Now, when you do discuss planning a crime, and we're going to utilize Bryan Kohberger and what people are utilizing as a narrative to commit the Idaho 4 crime, that everybody that fully has found him guilty so far has all of these different ways and reasonings that he planned for this. He had been planning his entire life in some people's minds. But what they don't get is what it actually entails in planning a crime. And I've done a little bit of describing the various things that go into planning crimes, and what I, who am far different than whoever committed the Idaho 4 crime, whether it be a first-timer like Bryan Kohberger, or a many-timer like a serial killer, or a group of individuals. I can't say that I'm exactly the same or would think exactly the same. But I do, at the end of the day, know what it entails to plan something, try to pull it off, and then even more so get away with it. I've been through it more than once. But the key factor, and I want to literally focus on it in this video, is a main key to any criminal act, that if you were to actually attempt to plan something and get away with it, and what people need to understand, the reason why I say to plan and actually attempt to get away with it, there are suicide by cop, there's other things that go into the mix of they never had a plan to get away with it. But it's quite obvious whoever, whatever group, whatever person, whatever reasoning, the Idaho 4 case, the reasons for it being committed or by who, they obviously intended to get away with it. They left the crime scene, and we still don't even know to this day, because we haven't been trial, if the correct person has been caught, or if all of the people have been caught if this individual was involved. But I can tell you, just by dissecting this case, what so many people are missing is one of the biggest common sense factors that goes into a getting away with it crime. When do you abort? When do you walk away knowing there's too many odds stacked against you to be able to commit the crime and truly get away with it? It's something that has to be built within you, and then you have to take the responsible act to be able to be patient enough that if necessary, you have to walk away. You just have to wait another time to be able to pull off whatever you're planning on doing. And right now is when all the eggs start getting thrown at me, because people would say it was the date. It had to be done on that day. It had to be done at that time. That was the day that he chose to do it. I don't agree with that. I don't believe that. I haven't found anything within what we knowledgeably know of why that day would be the reason behind it, especially when people are claiming that Maddie and Kaylee were most likely the targets. Kaylee wasn't even supposed to be there until she changed her mind at the last minute, and the only way anybody could have been prepared for Kaylee to be there is if they were tipped off and told just out of the blue that she was there. Otherwise, you can't plan for that. But when it comes down to one of the most important keys to a plan of getting away with the crime, you have to know when the odds are stacked against you, and you have to have that feeling within you that it doesn't seem right. So let's dissect the Idaho 4. Let's dissect that night, 11/13 of 2022, at the 1122 King Road home. And what if Brian Kohberger was the actual perp would have triggered that thought process that they just didn't plan for what was happening, and it was time to pull the trigger and just walk away. It starts right away when he decides, in their minds, to leave the apartment at 2:40 something a.m. You already have police activity right outside your own apartment door. These are the very people that are paid to stop crime. But also what they are paid for is to visually analyze things that could potentially lead to a crime. And they register these things later when they're investigating said crime. So when something the nature of a quadruple homicide on a college area happens, those officers are going to register back and remember vehicles that are moving at that odd time of the morning. 2:45 in the morning on a Sunday morning. Cars are coming home at that time because bars are closing and parties are ending. Leaving an apartment complex is common, even at 2:45 in the morning. But those officers are going to visually see it, especially when there is a wreck and people's lives already altered by the happenings right then and there at that scene. Brian Kohberger, or anybody that would have been leaving, would have seen those police lights and seen the activity, and it would have been a bad sign. But it would have just been the first bad sign, because you could still drive from there. You just have to remind yourself after the crime you can't come home because there's too much police activity and they could possibly be there for you to drive directly into. And after committing a crime as brutal as this and as bloody as this, not a good time to pull into your own driveway and expect to be able to walk into your house and potentially clean up after a crime like this. You're on the road. You're driving. You get all the emotions within you regathered after seeing those initial police headlights and the cruisers and everybody around, to get your emotions back into check and get near the crime scene so that you can get settled emotionally, to get refocused on committing the very crime that you set out to commit. And what happens? More activity, more officers, people still moving in the very area you didn't expect them to be in. Point 2 of visualization, again by people that could recognize you and your vehicle. And when it came down to it, when the details of the crime broke, they would remember seeing your car. So no go again. It's another chance to call it off and realize tonight's just not the night. But the officers leave the area, allowing you to continue your circling and your venturing to the point that you again find a way to begin to settle your nerves. Even though everything around you is already screaming, no, 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 you're fighting that no with a yes, because you have the urge to do exactly what you set out to do. Everything you planned is still in order. Except for the fact you're just going to drive circles because you don't know where to park. You have to make 3-point turns in an area that obviously would have ring cameras and many other ways of seeing you, like visual eyes of college students walking through the neighborhood, between the apartments, between the frat houses, all seeing the movement happening. And again, they're going to recognize your vehicle because you don't know how to park or where to park. In all of this pre-planning and all of this so-called stalking and visualizing everything happening in this crime, you never thought once about where you were going to park your car? You never thought once about a major part of this plan is how quick you could get in and out and how quickly you could do that without being seen? That wouldn't have been a key part to this crime. So as you drive around recklessly, unable to actually park your vehicle, I think that again would be a sign. Now is not the time. Call it off. Drive away and enjoy that freedom another day. But even in that time of still contemplating back and forth as you drive recklessly and aimlessly in circles and 3-point turns, you didn't notice one time the vehicles in front of the home, the unknown vehicles, not knowing who's actually in the home. And you didn't at all recognize the DoorDash driver as you're driving aimlessly around. You didn't see a vehicle stop to drop off food at the home, now even giving you the sign. Not everybody's asleep. And maybe that was a part of your plan, that you were actually trying to sneak in on them and catch them off guard while they slept. And now you know they're not all asleep. Who's potentially still awake? How many of them are still awake? Is this an actual party still happening at the home, and people are ordering food now because they're going to still be awake on this late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. It's still party central. You could sleep all day Sunday so you could stay up really late into the morning. Still partying. Still hanging out. Is it 2 of them? Is it 4 of them? Is it 6? Could it be 12? Could it be 100 people like other parties gather at that same exact location? Even if it's only a handful, there's only, in this case of the Idaho 4 narrative, one individual that supposedly has no knowledge of the actual individuals of the home, much less the home, even if they did stock it, which they now claim is untrue. That's another red flag. You don't know whose car is sitting out front, and it's obvious you've driven by it numerous times. Remember, that car's been there the entire night as those girls were out without a vehicle and had to catch rides from others. They didn't drive their own cars, so they were there the entire time. So how do you know who's home and who's not? You can't base it off the normality of what you would have seen because there's new added to the mix. That doesn't shake you up a little bit emotionally? Trust me, coming from an individual that was a criminal, you feel, you sense. The emotion builds as things become uncertain and you become nervous. Even if you've done it before, but even more so if you're a first timer. Your entire timeline has been thrown off from what probably was the original to whatever it became. I don't see it, ladies and gentlemen. Not a single perp planning of this crime. I can't tell you that a single perp couldn't commit the crime. I can't say a single person couldn't knife 4 people to the loss of life. It's obvious it's happened. But in the spidey senses of the Idaho 4, there are so many red flags that just about anybody and everybody with common sense would walk away from. You're telling me that this individual that's been proven to be maybe a little weird, maybe a little bit unable to communicate properly with females, but they've never been proven before to have committed a quadruple homicide in less than 7 minutes while all the chaos continues to happen around them. There's no chance that Brian Koberger, if he's the perp of this crime, did not see the officers outside of his apartment. There's no chance he did not see officers in and around the 1122 King Road home, even if people tell me that that undercover car was driven away prior to him arriving. There were other officers around. No question about it. There were people still out and about. And on top of that, there were people still awake in the house. The very house the crime was committed in. There were people still awake in the home. And the sad thing about it, to even throw another wrench into that whole ordeal, those who were not awake got woken. Don't forget about the runners and the lights behind the officers. They were still awake. Don't forget about the young men caught and discussed and talked to in the Banfield. They were still awake. There was a lot going on. And for someone who was planning the perfect crime, there was a lot going on that would have made it a very unperfect crime. ARHayes. This is convict's thoughts. And planning the perfect crime, it's not something that can be done. Have a great 4th of July. I hope you enjoy your fireworks. We'll talk again soon.